12,000 units of housing that have been converted to tourist accommodations over the last couple of years. Evictions are soaring, rents are soaring, and the number of these units that are listed as tourist rentals is soaring as well, and we need to rein it in. Now, last year the Board of Supervisors passed some legislation that ostensibly regulated Airbnb and these other short-term rental sites. But in fact, it didn't. In February, the Planning Department and the Board of Supervisors budget and legislative analysts and a group of graduate students from UC Berkeley went before the Board of Supervisors and said, that law that you passed last October is unworkable and unenforceable. That law says that if you are not at home, you can rent your entire place for 90 nights a year. And if you are there, you can rent an extra room for 365. You have to be registered with the planning department, you have to have a business license, you have to agree to collect and remit the hotel tax. But they said this distinction between hosted and unhosted rentals, how are we supposed to determine when somebody is sleeping in their own bed at night? And if you're going to set any cap at all, we've got to have regular reports from the hosts and the hosting platforms as to how many nights a place is rented and how many nights the host is present, because you're only allowed to do this in your primary residence. You can't buy a unit. You cannot buy a building and convert it to tourist accommodations under the law. That's what's going on, but it's illegal. And lastly, they said, there are so many units that have been converted to tourist accommodations that there is no way the city is going to be able to go after them one at a time. So we've got to have the ability to sanction Airbnb and these other hosting platforms for listing illegal, unregistered units. That was in February, just after the law took effect. Since then, 630 people have registered. There are 6,000 listings on Airbnb, and there are 6,000 more on those other 60 websites. The law is not working. So the board passed a series of amendments in July, and they made the law worse. The only way this is going to get fixed, the only way we're going to rein in this activity, the only way we're going to return these units to the city's housing stock is to pass Proposition F. Because City Hall is completely enamored with the sharing economy and with Ron Conway's money. The only way we're going to fix this problem is to pass Proposition F. Take a look at the endorsement list on the back of that piece of literature that I handed out. I mean, most of you have been in this town for a while. When's the last time you saw Dianne Feinstein and Quentin Kopp on the same side of an issue? When's the last time you saw the Building Trades Council and the Sierra Club on the same side of an issue? The West of Twin Peaks Council and the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council. The Tenants Union and the Apartment Association. The landlords and tenants have come together. They both recognize this is a serious problem. Tenants are being evicted, so property owners can convert units to tourist accommodations because it's much more lucrative. And landlords are concerned that tenants are doing this without the landlord's knowledge or permission. Under the existing law, anyone can list any unit, regardless of whether or not they own it, regardless of whether or not they're even the resident. I don't know if you saw the story in the Chronicle last week. A couple of guys went off to Burning Man for the week, and they hired a professional house sitter, and he rented the unit on Airbnb for $2,000 a week. This is crazy. This is out of control. PropF stops it. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, the other side.
I'm Keith Friedman. I'm a professor of computer science at City College. I've been in San Francisco for 18 years. I'm a renter. My landlady lives in the in-law unit below me. Dale already told you mostly what PropF is. What I'll do is tell you a little bit about what a short-term rental is, for those of you who don't know. It's when a person rents out a room and a home to a visitor for any stay less than 30 days at a time. These include spare bedrooms, children's bedrooms when they're away at college, or summer camp, and even an entire apartment when a resident goes to visit family or something on a business trip. This income helps San Francisco residents earn a little extra cash, brings new visitors to our neighborhood shops and cafes and restaurants, and contributes tax dollars to our local economy. What many of you may not know is that short-term rentals already are regulated. Dale spoke to that. The regulations went into effect in February. They were further refined in July. Something else that happened in July is that the city created a office of short-term rental enforcement, and that office, I believe, is being built right now. As far as enforcement goes, the law is enforceable, it's being enforced. There was one case in March. Someone was fined, a landlord who evicted tenants out of their homes and turned into short-term rentals was fined $267,000 by the city. That's pretty severe as far as I know. There's another case where recently the Office of Short-Term Rental has assessed $60,000 worth of fines. So when we say that the law is not enforceable, I have to disagree with you, Dale. The city's doing it. They may not be working at quite the pace you want, but they're moving as quickly as they can given current resources, which are increasing also. In June, their budget was increased. The problem I have with the law is that the solution apparently is to not let the city enforce its laws at all, but trust each of our neighbors to do the enforcement for us. So what can happen now is, even if you're not renting short-term at all, your neighbor can file a complaint with the city. The complaint is anonymous. You don't know that a complaint has been filed. 90 days later, even after the city has told the complainant, they've done nothing wrong, they're in compliance with the law, or they weren't even violating the law at all, you have a right to now sue your neighbor, even though they weren't doing anything wrong. I know which neighbor on my block is going to start suing people, and I'm sure each of you know which one's going to sue you. The worst part is that there are no consequences for that neighbor. Under PropF, if you're accused, whether you're accused correctly or wrongly accused, you have no way to recover your attorney's fees. However, if you made even one little mistake one day and your neighbor wins that lawsuit, you could be liable for their attorney's fees as well as $1,000 a day. That seems pretty excessive to me. I don't think encouraging neighbors to sue each other is really the way to protect and preserve neighborhood character, and neither does the planning department, who you cited earlier. They said that a private right of action will have a negative impact on the city's ability to prioritize and enforce this law. PropF also requires short-term rental hosts to file quarterly reports with very personal information. Dale downplayed it. You have to not only keep a log of what nights you spent at home, but also who slept in your house with you as a guest. Any guest has to be reported. You should read your own law, Dale. I read it before coming here. This information, the information has to be made public. So now not only do everyone know where I live and what I do with my own home, but you also know how many nights I slept there, when I slept there, when I didn't sleep there. And this is true even if you just rent short-term for one weekend or two weekends a year. This is a major public safety concern, and it's an invasion of privacy. Consumer Watchdog and even the police union oppose PropF for these reasons. I have an example which I'll give you a little later. I might probably not have time. Under the current law, the city has to prove that you violated the law in order to take action. This seems reasonable to me. If they pursue a claim without proof, you may recover the cost of defending yourself. Under PropF, no proof is required, and you bear your defense costs even if you win. In addition, PropF bans rental of short-term rental of in-law units. Many in-laws are occupied by full-time tenants who won't be able to rent short-term even if they have their landlord's permission. Since my landlady lives in the in-law, she won't be able to short-term rent the property she owns and lives in. This is arbitrary and makes no sense. In addition, many in-laws aren't suitable for full-time residents. So I'll stop there and take the rest for questions.
All right, thank you. Over here.
So the people who were fined $267,000, did they have to change their house back to their building back to regular rentals, or can they still rent it out as Airbnb?
Well, they can't rent it through Airbnb because in order to rent a short-term rental, it must be your primary residence and you must live there 275 nights. You must be in your home 275 nights a year. So they can't legally rent it under the current law.
And they weren't fined for violating the short-term rental ordinance. They were fined because they illegally evicted their tenants. The short-term rental ordinance hadn't gone into effect when City Attorney Dennis Herrera brought that action against them. So no one's been fined for violating the short-term rental ordinance.
$60,000 worth of fines were recently.
You know, I keep hearing that, and I don't see any sign of it. There's no public statement. There's nothing in the press. There's nothing about that.
I heard about it on NPR. I consider them the press. I don't know where you're listening to.
Yes. Have you heard it on NPR talk show, or you heard it from a news reporter? Do you consider it a problem that up to 10,000 units have been taken off the rental market?
If 10,000 units were taken off the rental market, then it would be a problem.
Do you dispute the number? What's your number?
I don't have a number because I don't make numbers up. I haven't read an actual number that came from an actual scientific source.
Okay.
I'm curious, it's just a point of information. Could you catalog in some objective way the damage that short-term rentals is doing to the city?
It's taking housing units out of the housing market.
Not general, specific.
I'll give you a set of numbers from the city's Office of Economic Analysis. Every housing unit that we lose that's illegally converted to a tourist accommodation costs the city between $250,000 and $300,000 in lost economic activity per year. So for every 1,000 units we lose, it's upwards of $300 million in a hit to the city's economy.
This is, when you're talking about economic activity, you're talking about restaurants nearby, not getting...
Everything. Everything.
Well, what else? Taxes, I mean, what?
The city's economist says that that hit outweighs any benefits that are accruing to the city. It outweighs the amount of money that hosts are receiving for renting to tourists. It outweighs the city's receipt of hotel taxes.
Is the same thing true for legally rented units, like the ones that are Holiday Inn uses?
Long-term residents spend more money in a neighborhood over time than tourists.
So, well, I'll respond with the information I have. Taking a housing unit off the market is currently illegal. It's already illegal. You don't have to pass a law to make something illegal. It's already illegal. All this does is allow your neighbors to sue you, among numerous other things. It's already illegal. The city is working on enforcing the law, and the units are going to come off the market. What this doesn't do is it doesn't add housing. It doesn't add units. It doesn't tell you that you have to take a place that you weren't renting before and rent it to a full-time renter. There's no requirement for a property owner to rent anything to anyone under PropF. So there's no guarantee that housing will be returned to the market if it in fact was taken off the market. So I think it's a red herring, the whole idea that these units are causing economic impact.
Well, that's not my number. That's the Office of Economic Analysis. That's the city's chief economist. And Airbnb doesn't give a rip about neighbors suing neighbors. Proposition F says, if Airbnb lists a unit that is not registered with the city, it can be fined. If VRBO or HomeAway or any of these 60 other websites list units that are not registered with the city, they can be fined. Airbnb doesn't care about neighbors suing neighbors. Airbnb is worried about the city suing Airbnb because there's only 630 people who have bothered to register out of 12,000 listings.
I can't speak for Airbnb because I don't work for them. I work for City College. But one of the problems with this law is that it really only affects Airbnb. It doesn't affect the 60 other lawsuits, because the San Francisco's ordinance can't reach people that are outside of San Francisco. Airbnb is here. We can go after Airbnb.
This is addressed to either one of you. Is there any way of differentiating what I think is a large number of people who, let's say, have an apartment of their own or a house of their own and want to rent a room?
Yeah,
From those who, rent whole apartments and take them off the market? Because I think that's a crucial issue.
the San Francisco Chronicle hired a couple of outfits to go and scrape the data from Airbnb and a couple of the other big websites. And what they found was, of the 5,000 or 6,000 listings on Airbnb, 2,000 of them were people renting an extra room. The rest were people renting entire units.
That's almost half.
And, so that's about 2,000 people. Airbnb hired Gene Sperling, who was the former chief economic advisor to President Clinton and President Obama. And he went through their data. And Sperling said the typical San Francisco host rents 73 nights a year. Under PropF, they can do it 75 nights a year. So the typical San Francisco host should be perfectly fine.
So many hosts, this is something that's a nuance. Because you can host while you're home and while you're away, oftentimes you will list your entire apartment for when you're going to be gone, and you list a room while you're home. So many of those listings, there's duplicate listings per rent unit. Some people have bunk beds. Friends of mine, when their kids are gone, they have a separate listing for each of their bunk beds. So the numbers of listings need to be tied to the number of homes. And a listing does not necessarily mean a home. It doesn't mean a housing unit. It means a listing.
How many are duplicates?
I don't have that data. When you do your next web scrape, why don't you ask them to be more specific?
Airbnb has that data.
Back there.
Why is it set up that when you sue someone with a private right of action, that the money goes to the neighbor and not to the city, or not to providing housing for people that,
There's a private right of action in the existing law.
and it pays the neighbor, correct? It doesn't go back to the city, your neighbor.
That's right.
The person that sues you.
That's right.
gets the fine.
If you go to the trouble of filing a complaint with the planning department, and you document that the activity is illegal, the guy is not renting his primary residence, the guy is not registered, the guy is renting for more than 75 nights a year under PropF, and the city does nothing with that complaint, you ought to have the right to go to court and protect your own privacy and defend your own right to the quiet enjoyment of your home. And you ought to be able to collect the fines that would otherwise accrue to the city if they had pursued that violation.
Under PropF, if you are doing nothing wrong and you are not even hosting, without having any proof, your neighbor can then file a complaint with the city. The city can investigate it and say, no, they weren't doing anything wrong, and their neighbor can still sue you, and you have to defend yourself. And if you successfully defend yourself, if I defend myself, I don't get my money back.
But
why does my neighbor get paid, and I don't get to get paid if I'm victimized by a terrible neighbor that just has the money to file for those lawsuits?
Your neighbor can sue you under the current law, and any court can award you attorney's fees if you prevail.
Under the current law, under PropF,
Not true.
Read it.
I read
Read your own fucking law.
So it's off of their website. They took the link to the legislation off of your website.
It's on the Department of Elections website. You're free to read it anytime.
Perhaps another question will elucidate a point here somewhere in the back.
Sorry, I heard you bring up the 10,000 number.
Dale, it came from Dale.
It comes from the Chronicle. The Chronicle found that Airbnb, month to month, has between 5,500 and 6,000 listings every month. And Airbnb claims that it has half the market in short-term rentals in San Francisco. So if you double the Chronicle's numbers, it's between 10 and 12,000.
The woman over there.
So actually, the Chronicle's latest analysis showed that by their figures, that only about 300 and change units have been taken off the market. So that's a really distinct difference between the thousands that the F campaign is putting in their narrative. Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, you know, the most telling number in the Chronicles analysis for me was roughly 200 hosts have nearly 1,000 listings. So, I mean, yes, there are people who are renting extra rooms from time to time to make a little extra money. But the bulk of the activity on Airbnb, and certainly nearly all of the activity on these other 60 websites, is people renting entire units all the time.
So you disagree with the Chronicles?
On that aspect of it, yeah, I do.
I'm willing to take them at their word. Dale's happy to quote them some of the times when the number supports his position, but then he dismisses it when it doesn't. So,
well, it's indisputable. I'm a landowner. I rent out a room on a 2-month basis to folks who are moving to the city or moving around and about. I've had someone in there for a year and a half now. That's been unusual over the past 5 years. But I don't think anyone would dispute that as long as there is rising land value, rent potential in San Francisco, I would gain it. So we're really going to address that by addressing that issue in some fashion. Or somebody will continue, all of us who are landowners will continue to gain that possibility of gaining that rising land value. So I hear good arguments from both of these gentlemen, and I'm not settled in my own perspective to share as a landowner.
Either of you want to comment on that, or we can go on to another?
I don't like the NSA aspect that I'm hearing. Possibly part of it.
I'm a renter, and I've never had a rent reduction in 18 years that I've lived in San Francisco. But I've had 2 pay cuts as a teacher in San Francisco. So something has to help. I need some way to make up the difference between my teaching pay cut and my increasing cost of living.
That's natural enough. So why wouldn't somebody do that? It's amazing.
Thank you. Well, first of all, anecdotally, I have 3 listings, and none of those listings were in my home, and none of them would ever go to a full-time renter. So I wonder if those 3 are being counted. But I do have one question for Mr. Carlson about if PropF were to pass. My understanding is I need to, on a quarterly basis, not only say how many nights I've done short-term rentals, but also how many nights I've slept there. So let's say I hit that 75-day cap in the first quarter, so I can't do short-term rentals anymore. The next 3 quarters, I still need to report how many nights I'm sleeping at my house. That seems a little creepy.
Well, the law as it exists says that you can only rent your primary residence. And it defines your primary residence as the place you live 275 nights a year. So if you're going to go in and register and claim, this is my primary residence, and yes, I live here 275 days a year, if you're going to continue to do this, whether or not you burn through your 75 nights in the first quarter, or the second, or the third, or whenever, if you want to continue to do it in the following years, then yeah, you're going to have to document that it remains your primary residence.
So if it's my primary residence, but I'm a consultant and I travel a lot, and I'm only home on the weekends because I go to different cities for work, then I wouldn't be able to do it at that home or any other home?
Under the current law, I don't know the answer to that.
I can answer that for you. Under the current law, the current law doesn't make the distinction about your primary residence as a place that you reside 275 nights a year, or days a year. It doesn't say nights actually, so you don't actually have to sleep there under the current law. You have to spend your time there. So you could travel and host when you're traveling or not. It doesn't matter. It's fine. But you do have to do an annual. Under the original law, you had to do annual reporting. You simply said, I've been in my house more than 275 days this year, and it's the same kind of penalty of perjury as you have for filing your taxes. So the IRS seems to be happy with that kind of requirement. I think it should be good enough for the city of San Francisco.
All right, could be the last one. Let's see. Yep.
I don't get how the city can enforce something like this. Like, how do you, besides documentation, which is kind of an honor system, how do you enforce someone if someone is staying at their home 275 nights a year, like your neighbors, for example? What if
Well, they can do that now. They can do that under the existing ordinance now.
Why do we need a new one?
So if PropF passes, how does that change?
If PropF passes, the only thing that changes in regards to the private right of action is you're entitled to a court award of the fines that would otherwise go to the city if they brought the action and they prevailed in court. You know, again, the guts of PropF are about holding $25 billion corporations like Airbnb accountable. The guts of PropF are about telling Airbnb, you cannot continue to list illegally offered units. You know, we set all kinds of standards for all kinds of businesses. If you are fortunate enough to be able to make a $10,000 cash deposit to your bank or withdraw $10,000 in cash from your bank, that's a reportable transaction. You go up the street to Walgreens and buy Sudafed, that's a reportable transaction. The corner grocer cannot sell six-packs and cigarettes to minors. We hold businesses of all kinds accountable for abiding by the regulations that we set down for them. Airbnb is accountable for nothing.
If you'd like to close with 3 minutes.
Let's go to the question one of you raised about the number of complaints that I've filed. The more visible this campaign has become, the more complaints that I've heard. Like a young woman whose family owns a 3-unit building on Hyde Street near Fisherman's Wharf. And their ground floor tenant claims to be the #1 host on Airbnb in San Francisco. He rents his $3,000 a month rent-controlled apartment for up to $11,000. And he uses the proceeds to spend 3 months in Bali and 3 months in Thailand. Or the young couple who reached out to me because their 8-unit building in North Beach had changed hands. And as tenants moved out, the out-of-state landlord had converted the units to VRBO. So yeah, I filed that complaint on their behalf. There is no possible way that the city is going to be able to enforce the current law with 3 people in the omnipotent Office of Short-Term Rentals with the backlog of cases that it has now. The only way we're going to get a handle on this is for the city to be able to go after the hosting platforms that are aiding and abetting illegal activity. All right, in July, Airbnb sent a note to its hosts. Hey, good news, we're about to be certified as a qualified website, eligible to collect and remit the hotel taxes on your behalf. Let us take this opportunity to remind you, you need a business license. And it's a very simple process. Just click here.